In this video we're looking at my PC, how I built it, and why I chose this particular specification, and all from an older gamer's perspective. Before we get into this video, a quick disclaimer.
Already?
Firstly, this is the opinion of an older gamer. I don't claim to be the older gamer. I'm just someone with around 35 odd years of computer gaming experience, and this is my perspective. I don't believe it's the definitive perspective, but I do believe it's mine.
That sound fair?
Secondly, this isn't a definitive guide on how to spec or build a PC. It's not even really a particularly useful guide to either of those themes. It's more of a vague overview of why I chose the various components that I chose and a rough look at how I put it all together.
I'm very confused.
If that's helpful to you, that's great. But if you really want some good up-to-date advice on what components to buy for your mega gaming frame rate slaying PC, I suggest you visit Jason over at PC Builder. If you're in the market for a new PC build or just looking for component upgrade, his channel should be your first port of call. If, on the other hand, you need some good advice on how to build a PC, you're best visiting JayZ2Cents, who has probably forgotten more about building PCs than I ever knew. And I've been building PCs now for over 30 years.
Okay, I understand.
With that out of the way, here's my PC build. I've built my current PC like every other PC I've owned in my life, from various components that I've spec'd via the internet and even some real-life computer shops. The choice of these components may seem strange to you, but they are based on two requirements. One, the build must fit my budget, and two, the final build should work both as a gamer PC and a creator PC that I need for my day-to-day work. You know, how I earn money.
I need the money.
Which is as a photographer, a video editor, and a content creator for various websites. Oh, and I also write books. If you're interested, there's a link below. My choices for a PC build may not work for you, but they do work for me.
This computer looks super retro.
For a frame of reference, I built this PC in January 2023. With that in mind, the specifications I went with were an Intel Core i5-13600K mounted on an MSI Pro Z790-A mainboard. I added 64 GB of Kingston Fury Beast DDR4 RAM running at 3200 MHz, with Windows 11 installed to a Seagate FireCuda 530 M2 drive stick. A second-hand RTX 3070 I obtained from eBay, paying probably way too much money for it, covers the graphics department, with the mainboard's ALC 4080 sound chip providing the audio. CPU cooling would be provided by the Be Quiet Dark Rock Pro 4, and this is all going to be installed in a Be Quiet Pure Base 600 enclosure. Mine came with a Go Faster silver stripe on the front.
Very cool.
Power supplied by a Be Quiet Straight Power 1000 watt PSU, needed mostly to power the ever-hungry 3070, but also the demands of the i5 13 Gen when the turbo kicks in. Once the delivery man had finished cursing me for all the times he needed to visit my house, my assembly bench looked like this, and I was ready to begin the build. First, I installed the i5, and this is just a matter of removing the plastic protection from the socket. This needs to be teased gently out.
Easy peasy.
Once that's done, I identify the correct orientation of the CPU to the socket by finding the markers on the corner of the CPU and the socket it's going into. Then gently placing it in the cradle, lowering the plate and locking the arm into position. With that done, I install a FireCuda M2 into the slot on the mainboard that offers the best performance. So I remove the two screws that hold down the heatsink, and then insert the M2 drive. Once I've lowered the tail end and secured it with the spring-loaded clip, job's done. Once that's in place, I remove the sticky covering from the heatsink's thermal pad. It pays not to forget that, otherwise you'll be very disappointed later when your M2 drive gets really hot. With the heatsink in place, it's time to assemble the bracket that will hold the very large CPU tower cooler. With the tower cooler bracket in place, I can install the RAM. Again, here you need to check your manual to see which DIMM sockets you should use. I install a total of 64 gig. Overkill perhaps for gaming, but entirely necessary when using such greedy applications as Photoshop.
Photoshopping free!
Then it's time to fit the cooler tower, which is secured to the backing plate I fitted earlier by a bracket. To attach it, you need a very long screwdriver, one that passes through the heatsink itself. Fortunately, Be Quiet supply one with the cooler that is of sufficient length. Before it can be fitted, I applied the thermal paste to the CPU, spreading it out with, yes, a guitar plectrum. Given how bad I am at playing guitar, this is probably the best use I can make of that particular item. With the thermal paste sufficiently spread out, I peel off the plastic, again, don't forget this, and then place the heatsink on the CPU and secure it into place using the bracket and the 2 screws provided. After that, fans are placed on the back and middle of the cooler, secured with metal clips. The connectors are designed to join together and are then placed onto the fan outlet designated for control of the CPU fans. With the mainboard reaching the minimum state of construction, I returned to the case and fitted the pillars on which the mainboard would sit. Then, as carefully as possible, I placed the mainboard on these pillars and secured them with the correct screws. After that, I fitted an additional fan to the front of the case because, well, you can never have enough fans, can you? Once that's done, I start wiring up the mainboard in the case. Here I am attaching the audio cable that connects the front panel headphone and mic sockets to the mainboard's sound output. And then I connect the power reset hard drive-like connections on the case to the mainboard. You'll need 2 manuals for this, the mainboard and the case. And finally, I connect up the additional cooling fan. Next, the power supply went in, screwed in at the bottom rather than at the top like we did it back in the day of yore. This is a modular PSU, which means you only need to fit as many cables as your setup requires. For this initial setup, I had cables to power the CPU, the mainboard, and the case fans. I haven't bothered to fit the graphics card at this point and will instead be setting up Windows using the onboard graphics chip. This just makes life easier. And the computer now has enough basic features to boot, so it's time to introduce a monitor, keyboard and mouse, and then the moment of truth, turning it on. Joy, the fans all spin, the computer beeps.
It's alive.
Although there's this heart-stopping message about the CPU, but don't panic, it just means the mainboard hasn't seen this particular CPU on account of it being new. So I press F1, the computer reboots, recognizes the CPU, and dumps me into the BIOS. Fantastic. Here I can check the CPU is the correct clock speed, and that the one M2 drive I have placed in the system has been seen and recognized. Memory is running at the default 2400 MHz, but that's fine for installing Windows. In fact, it's probably preferential. I can update the setting and use the full 3200 MHz once everything is safely installed.
Safe.
Then, after inserting a USB stick which contains the Windows 11 install files, I reboot. The computer finds the setup files and begins installing Windows 11. Yes, Windows 11. Here's a speeded up version of the install process. But to be honest, with an i5-13600K, the whole thing was installed very quickly.
It's fast.
Once that was done, I could power down and begin installing all the other equipment I needed to run the system as a gamer and creator PC, namely 2 additional FireCuda M2 drives, each 1 TB big, one for games and the other for render files. 2 FireCuda 4 TB hard drives, one for storing photographs and one for storing video. The RTX 3070, a DVD burner, just in case any client ever asks for a DVD ever again.
Unlikely.
And a couple of USB backplates attached to the mainboard USB headers to give me some more USB options. I then added the additional power cables and installed all the other drivers. I mean, sure, there are a million and one other things I did after that, and I'm still discovering programs and drivers that I need to install, but generally speaking, once I'd updated all the mainboard drivers, the system has been running very stable. And that was it. My personal experience with this setup is that it can run pretty much everything at full speed, with the odd exception.
Definitely abnormal.
Certainly it's beefy enough to run the Oculus Quest 2 over Airlink and see an acceptable level of frames per second. Although I'm still not very good at Pavlov, but that's not the fault of the system. If you've reached this far, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions or if you want to tell me about your own PC building experiences, please leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of any future videos.